All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. A warm welcome. Good evening, or good afternoon, or good morning, whatever part of the world you might be in. It's always a treat to see you here practicing so we can practice together. So just a note about the YouTube up there. You might have noticed it says we're live on YouTube. It's actually just the way that we record these meetings, but it will be publicly posted unless you let me know that you have some concern about that. And you can do that in the chat or by email. And they usually get posted a couple days after the talk, a day or so after the talk. And so this being Tuesday evening, as usual, we're going to have about half an hour of meditation, guided meditation. And then after the guided sit, we will just move right into a Dhamma talk. And so maybe about half an hour or so of a talk. And then there will be time for questions and answers, comments and reflections from anyone, everyone at the end of the evening. So for this evening's meditation, I thought that we would do just a very simple mindfulness of mental activity. And so first we're going to begin by settling into the body and letting the body be a bit of a stabilizer, bringing us into the present moment and helping the mind to settle down enough to observe itself. So you can just begin by moving the body. Sometimes moving the head is helpful, or some rocking, just as a way to loosen up any tension or any tendency to be leaning toward the computer or the phone or whatever your device is. And sensing the weight of the body on your seat. Allowing the belly to become soft. And from that stable base, as best you can, allowing the back to come into alignment. Coming into an upright posture. all the way up through the neck and the head, gently aligned. Knowing that the bones are carrying the weight of the body, then perhaps the muscles of the shoulders and the neck can also soften and relax. And now turning the attention to the mental activity, just becoming aware of thoughts. Thoughts may be like the radio playing in the background. No need to argue with the radio or sing along. Just observing the presence of thoughts. And if there are moments without thought, also observing that mind without thought. And as you are observing thought for some time, perhaps beginning to notice which thoughts are bodily perceptions and which thoughts are thoughts about thoughts. Just observing again closely, not judging or trying to make one or the other appear. Staying curious about mental activity. Activity as it relates to the physical body. And mental activity that's relating to other mental activity. All right, friends, that was our meditation for this evening. And if you have comments or questions about that, we can talk about that later. Basically, a very, very simplified version of the 6 sense bases. Just dividing them up by body and mind and training the mind to be able to see the mind contacts. But we're going to move on from that to a very different topic for this evening. And so go ahead and adjust your posture or your camera, whatever you'd like to do. Yep, so please, okay, Charles Lee, thanks for letting us know. It's good to sit with you. Yeah, please go ahead and mute your mic if you haven't already. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Some of you may know and may already be thinking about joining the next online class, which is starting on November 10th. It's a class on the awakening stories of the Soto Zen tradition. It's called Transmission of the Light. And even if you're not thinking about participating, I brought a story that relates to that. And is going to tell us something about mudita, about the practice of empathetic joy or the lack thereof. And a little something about, what how to think about the self from the lens of Zen practice. So I brought this story, and it's a story, a very, very old story about a monk, and he was born around mid 7th century, and so actually a little earlier than that. And he became what's known as the 6th Zen ancestor. His name was Huineng in Chinese. So this is Chinese Buddhism. This is a number of years, about 3 centuries, 2, 3, 4 centuries, maybe more, 3 or 4 or 5 centuries after Buddhism came to China from India. And Huineng was practicing at a very prestigious, large monastery run by another monk named Hongren. And Hongren was ready to retire. He just decided one day, okay, I'm ready to name my successor. And so he called a poetry contest. Now think about that for a second. This is a huge, prestigious monastery with hundreds of monks in China, and the very esteemed, respected abbot who is said to be actually using a robe that was passed down from the Buddha to Mahakashapa is ready to retire, and his way of choosing his successor is by a poetry contest. So the monks are told this is how it's going to be done, and so the head monk, the one who was expected to be the successor, let's say, felt a little shy about his poem, but he went ahead, and in the middle of the night he wrote his poem on the wall, and a bunch of people saw it and said, "Oh, that's a great poem, that's a great poem." And the master said, "Oh yes, that person will do well in their practice," so on. But then Huineng saw the poem. He was said to be illiterate, actually. He couldn't read or write Chinese, but he had somebody read him the poem from the wall, and he said, "Oh, that's bunk." He wrote his own poem on the wall in the middle of the night. And Hongren, the master, said, now this is the person who will receive my... Actually, in the beginning, publicly, he said, this is not a good poem. Don't listen to this guy. But then in the middle of the night, he called Huineng to his quarters and said, "Oh no, yours was the perfect poem, but people are going to be very surprised that you are the successor." This was a monk who had been working in the kitchen, basically, was not considered to be one of the likely successors, let's put it that way, to put it mildly. So anyway, so he receives the succession, he receives the robe and the bowl of the abbacy. But then Hongren says, "Okay, folks are going to be very, very surprised and upset about this, I imagine. So you should go on a long walk." He tells Huineng, Hongren tells Huineng, "You should go on a long walk. A walk of about maybe 3 years or so." And he sends him away with the robe and the bowl. And so what happens? What happens is that many of Huineng's Dharma brothers were indeed upset. And now this is where we get to talk about mudita, right? So what is mudita? Mudita is one of the 4 immeasurables, one of the 4 so-called sublime or divine dwellings, right, from early Buddhism. And it means empathetic joy. It means you having joy when someone else has a wholesome joy. So something like this, a wholesome joy where some Dharma practitioner gets recognized for their penetrative insight, would be, potentially could be, something that would spark a lot of empathetic joy for his Dharma brothers. But that wasn't what happened, right? They were worried. And this is the key to this is the wholesome part of it, right? So mudita is about resonating with someone else's joy, but only someone else's joy when they have done or have received something wholesome, when there's something wholesome that's happening in their life, right? So like, let's say empathetic joy over a bank robbery, probably not so good. But empathetic joy over wholesome deeds is what is helpful. And this is where the concern was, right? So the brothers, the other Dharma brothers, thought that he had stolen the robe and bowl, or that he had somehow duped the abbot into giving him the bowl, right? Because then why would he just run off? This was kind of the reasoning that was happening, right? Why would he just run away if he hadn't actually stolen it or somehow tricked Hongren into giving him the robe and bowl? So it's said that a couple hundred monks set out after Huineng. And one of them was a former general from the army, from the Chinese army, somebody who knew how to track somebody down. Myo is the way that his name is pronounced usually. Myo, Monk Myo. And so Monk Myo, as might be expected by his training prior to becoming a monk, is the first person who gets close to Huineng, right? So Huineng's gone up into the mountains with the special robe and bowl, and he sees Monk Myo approaching. And this is where the story opens in the Koan. So the Koan is a Chinese word, and it's from an older term that meant a public proclamation. And it was literal, like pieces of paper with writing, public writing, like laws and things would get posted in the center of the town. They would get nailed up on a board somewhere. That was the phrase that was used for that. And so it came to be used for these teaching stories, these Buddhist teaching stories. Why? Because a public proclamation was something that applied to everyone. And similarly, these teachings, these Koan stories, were understood to apply to everyone, to be teachings that could be, you could say, revelatory or helpful, supportive, insightful for anyone. And so we have many collections of koans. There are several of them. This is from a collection called The Gateless Gate, Mumon-kan. It's a play on the name of the original collector of these stories, Mumon, very, very famous Chinese Zen teacher. Obviously later than Hongren and Huineng by a lot. But anyway, he collected a bunch of stories and gave some poetry and commentary on them as well. And that has come down to us. And so the translation of that is, roughly speaking, the gateless gate or the gateless barrier. And so here's how the koan goes. So the sixth ancestor was pursued by monk Myo to Da Yurde. Da Yurde is just the name of a mountain. He saw him coming, right? Huineng, who received the succession, the new abbot, saw monk Myo coming and laid down the robe and bowl on a stone and said, "This robe symbolizes faith. How can we fight over it?" And I'm paraphrasing a little bit. This is a translation. Let's see this is Zenke Shiba Yamaroshi's translations and commentary, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, or perhaps adjusting this translation based on some other translations that I've also seen. There are many of them. Robert Bly and Cleary, I believe, also have translated it, Thomas Cleary. So he says, he puts down the robe and the bowl and he says, "This robe symbolizes faith. How can we fight over it? You can have it, you can take it." So right away, this encounter, we see a number of teachings, right? We see Huineng understands that this robe and this bowl are not what makes him the successor. Right? They are just the symbols. They are just the material things that he has been given. But it was his practice and his insight and his teaching that he had written up on the wall that makes him the successor. In English, the phrase that we have for this is the robes don't make the man or the woman or the person of whatever gender, right? The clothes don't make the man or the person. And perhaps also, Huineng could be unattached to those material objects because of his history, somewhat because of his history. The reason why he was illiterate was because his father had died when he was young. And so he and his mom were very, very poor. It said that he used to sell sticks and firewood in the town where they lived. And because he had to do that, then he couldn't go to school and study. They were so poor that he had to spend his whole day selling firewood. So he knew that his value as a person, because he went on from that, right? To go do what he wanted to do with his spiritual life. He went on to become a very strong practitioner. So he knew that his outward appearance wasn't what actually determined his value as a person. So it's an important teaching for us as well. And the Buddha also spoke about this when he talked to the Kalamas, famously spoke to the Kalamas who had exposure to a lot of different teachers. And he said, don't go by the lineage that someone is in or what book they're reading from or any of that when you decide who to practice with. And I really appreciate that he says that the robe symbolizes faith. Because truly you can say that any sort of material things that get shared representing our practice, whether it's a robe or a bowl or a book or a certificate or a raksu or any number of different objects that are used in different Buddhist traditions, all of that symbolizes faith. All of that symbolizes the trust and the confidence in the relationships, right? That's what's happened actually between Hongren and Huineng, is a trust in the relationship. Hongren said, I trust you to carry this teaching forward, right? And Hongren had that stuff because someone said to him, I trust you. And someone said to that person before them and before them and before them, going all the way back to the Buddha. So it's about relationship. Part of what this initial encounter is teaching Monk Myo is about relationship and the value of that and the value of trust over the value of material things. So then it says, this is actually my favorite part of the koan. It says, Myo tried to pick up the robe, but it was immovable as a mountain. So he couldn't pick up the robe, right? And whether that means some kind of magical thing or whether that just means metaphorically that he suddenly felt a pang of guilt, right? Or he suddenly realized like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? So then it says, Myo was terrified and hesitated. This is sometimes translated as fear. In fear, he hesitated. That's how Cleary translates it. And then he says, Monk Myo says to Huineng, his Dharma brother, I have come for the Dharma, not the robe. I beg you to teach me, brother. Ah, so wait. So now he has this big change of heart, right? Suddenly he sees that he can't just steal the succession away from Huineng. Even if he were to take the robe and bowl, that doesn't make him the new abbot. And maybe suddenly, because Huineng spoke about faith, spoke about having been given the robe in faith, he suddenly also realizes that him going after his Dharma brother like that is actually questioning the judgment of his own teacher, right? Hongren is his teacher and made that decision. So to go after Huineng like that is to say something negative, potentially, about both of their mutual teacher, who he respected, obviously, or he wouldn't be upset about the whole issue. So suddenly he allows this fear and this hesitation to turn him toward the Dharma. It's a beautiful moment. It's a beautiful, beautiful moment. If you're going to have fear, then use it for that. Use it to turn you toward the Dhamma. Turn you toward the teaching, to open your mind. What is it? What is this telling me about what's happening right now, about what I can learn from what's happening right now? So Huineng lays it on him. Huineng responds with a teaching, a classic Zen teaching. This is why it's come down to us in the Koan. He says, speaking like a good Zen ancestor, he says, thinking neither good nor bad, at this moment, what is the original face of Monk Myo? What is your original face? Or it's also translated sometimes as true self, although that true self way can get confusing for people. So we'll talk about that later if you want to. Thinking neither good nor bad, right in this moment, what is your original face? So there's three parts to this teaching that he's giving him in the form of a question. There are three parts here. So the first part is thinking neither good nor bad. So what's the pointer there? The pointer is to set down your judgment for a minute, right? Set down your judgment, set down your divisive mind of this side or that side. Just set all that down for a minute. And then the second part of it is right now in this moment. Right now in this moment. A key part of this teaching that he's given him. Meaning not thinking about what happened in the past, whether it was the past when the succession happened or the past in your life or something you read in a book before, or not jumping forward to the future, what's going to happen if I say this or don't do that. No, right now. What is your original face? So this phrase, the original face, is sometimes also said, your face before your parents were born. Your face before your parents were born. Or your true, again, it says sometimes true face or true self. And so just to give you a little bit of a hint about that, it's asking you, what are you? What is this life that you're leading? What are you? Without any of your identity from this lifetime. Right? From before your parents were born. So even before your parents thought of having you before you were a twinkle in your parents' eyes, as we say. What were you? So it's a very, very big question, but he's telling him, don't try to analyze it. Don't try to divide it up into good and bad. And don't wait. Give some kind of spontaneous, right? It's got to be right here, right now. Your original face. So the koan goes on. I'm not going to answer that for you. You guys will have to think about the question for yourselves. Everybody gets to think about the koan, right? I gave you lots of hints. So. But here's how the koan goes on. So it says, at this point, Myo was at once enlightened. Or Cleary doesn't give such a definitive thing and says, Myo then, has a moment of insight. So Monk Myo suddenly has an aha of some sort, whether it's the big final aha, we don't know, but some aha moment happens to him, right? This particular set of 3 pointers helped him to realize something about himself, about what he was doing. So it says, in tears, he made a bow, he paid respects to Huineng. So now he's ready to acknowledge this succession. He's ready to acknowledge his Dharma brother as somebody who deserves this robe and bowl, who is going to go forward in this way. But then he says this, he asks, besides these secret words and meanings, is there any further significance or not? Oh, Monk Myo, he hasn't gotten it yet. That's why I don't like this translation of he was enlightened, because that next question shows actually that he wasn't. He's still looking for the secret decoder ring or the whatever secret mystery phrase or the, secret handshake or the whatever it is. He's still looking for some special something. From Huineng. Rather than realizing this unique special something that Huineng is pointing him to. So Huineng immediately corrects him, immediately. He doesn't let him stay with that mistake. And he says, what I have just told you is not a secret. If you realize your original face, what is secret is in you, is you yourself. It's actually repetitive. What is secret is in you yourself. That's exactly the wording that Shibayama Roshi uses to translate that phrase. He repeats it. It's you yourself, this secret that you're looking for. And so this is really the crux of the matter right here. This way of looking for our practice to turn us into someone special is not unusual. This happens all the time, right? Want to be a Buddha, or I want to be a great Bodhisattva, or I just want to be a better version of myself, or I want to have a special robe, or get to sit up on the throne and teach people, or whatever it is. There are all kinds of ways that we can turn this practice into some kind of make me a shinier version of myself. And that was the attitude that Monk Myo approached with. But what Huineng is showing him again and again and again is that this life, this human life, this particular body and mind, his, Myo's, Huineng's, yours, mine, every one of us, right, is the full miracle right here. That's why it's available right here, right now, without judging good or bad. That's why it doesn't really have anything to do with your identity or your parentage. Because that is just the nature of a human life. This thing is the full miracle for each one of us. And we are each a unique little miracle, incomparable, right? The Buddha said in the Book of Eights, he said, don't call yourself better than someone else. Don't call yourself worse than someone else. Don't call yourself equal to someone else. All of those would be incorrect. You are incomparable. There is no way to really make those comparisons, because even that is to establish a solidity to the self that doesn't make sense. But, and that is true because the principles are doing what they're doing. They're showing up here as these things. We are that beautiful workings of the fleeting nature of all things. We are that incredibly pervasive way in which all things are also falling apart. We are that incredible, completely interconnected set of threads that are woven into reality. We couldn't be anything but that. There isn't any other place to look for it. It's not going to be hiding in the folds of the robe for Myo or for anybody else. So we have to be both. We have to be this incredible full miracle, and we have to also be the most mundane, average thing in the world. Willing to just give up that robe and bowl or whatever it is, right? Willing to know that that isn't what's going to make it. That isn't what makes us special. So what ultimately gets transmitted is the knowledge that you yourself are the Dharma. That's what Myo needs to know. That he himself is the full Dharma. So ultimately in the Koan, what happens is that we think that Myo does get it. Or at least he really gets it to the degree that he's able to step into this relationship in a new way. So after Huineng says to him, what I have just told you is not secret. If you realize your original face, what is secret is in you yourself. Then Myo responds by saying, although at Obai, at the monastery, I followed other monks in training, I didn't awaken to my original self. But thanks to your instruction, which is to the point, I am like one who has drunk water and actually experienced for himself whether it is cold or warm. Meaning, I am like someone who actually now has a sense of my own experience. Sense of my own experience as the Dhamma. You are really my teacher, brother. So at the end,